And over to you, James.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me. And welcome everyone to today's webinar. So I'm just going to quickly run through some slides, and maybe we can hold any questions you have either in the chat box or at the end of the presentation. It'll just be a quick one. Let me just try and see if I can replicate what I did just now with Joe in terms of sharing my screen. Give me a second. Okay. Can you guys sound off? You can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so let's try and do that. Okay, great. So today's topic is actually about 5 tips when marketing to parents. So in my line of work, I actually see parents as one of the a few stakeholders within the education space. So the others would be, educators and principals, and of course the students themselves or children themselves. This is just to give a sense of what my world was. So I actually do a lot of marketing and sales into public schools across Asia. So this is Lego Robotics. And then we also do a more B2C kind of business where we actually work with enrichment center owners to promote their products and services using Lego towards moms and dads of K-12 kids. Okay, so my experience has been with K-12 publishing with Scholastic, and the key business challenge there was how do we support schools in Asia to implement impactful English reading programs. And over the right-hand side, with Lego Education, it was more around K-12 STEM education, very specific. And we worked with all kinds of stakeholders, you can see over there. And the key business challenge there was a little bit different. So how do we get Asian parents and educators to try fun and hands-on education, in their place of learning, be it at home or in the schools or institutions that we work with. Okay. So I think the first tip that I want to just share is really trying to get a handle of what's a parent's week like. The first thing that you try and do as a marketer is really to sit down and put yourself in the shoes of the parent. And if you're not a parent, like I am not a parent, what I do is I actually work with my sister who is a parent. And also my friends, as well as some of my teacher friends as well, as much information as you can get, right? So the approach that I try to advocate for is an outside-in approach. So we interview parents. It's quite important to kind of listen for emotions, because emotions are a key to understanding what are the pain points, what is really bugging parents during the week. So how I would do it is really just free flow. Tell me about your week, and then they'll start talking about the routines, and then you can listen out for what are some of the things or issues that they're struggling with, and potentially at the back of your mind you can figure out what are some of the potential areas of opportunity for your product or your company's product or service to be of use to address those pain points, right? So the first thing I would probably suggest doing is set up a persona A weekly schedule. So persona A is whichever parent segment that you have or persona you have described for your business or defined for your business, and identify what are her pain points or what are the key themes, and then figure out what our solutions can resolve, right? So when you interview parents, or if you're able to organize a focus group with parents, that's even better. Always look for the key themes and the pain points, and also how does that map to our solutions that our company or our organization can hope to resolve, right? The second tip is actually building the personas. So maybe I should have started off with this one first. But basically, building a persona is, I wouldn't say it's a new thing. A lot of organizations have done that for maybe the past 10 years. But it's really more than just sitting in a team building or a workshop in your office and trying to figure out, crack your brain about who is our persona. I think the idea is to build a persona after you've talked to a sufficient number of customers out there, or who you think are potentially customers out there. And then as you figure out the themes, as after your interviews, you should try to come up with a table like this. You don't have to follow this format, of course. But so how I would like to define the personas is really what are the key emotional drivers during the week for these three personas that I've listed here. So these are by no means definitive, but for instance, I have one persona that I've defined as Pennywise Penelope, right? So in her world, her emotional driver is in her week as a parent is control. Okay, and then I have Tiger Mom Tina, and her emotional driver is efficiency, right? She wants to be efficient. And then there's Carefree Catherine, right? So as her name suggests, her emotional driver in the week is she wants to be happy. She wants to feel happy about what she does during the week. And then you can kind of drill down, depends on the needs of your team. What are the key pieces of information you feel would help define or differentiate these different persona? So the key sources of information, I have said that, okay, so that's important. I want to know, oh, do these three personas actually source their information about products and services from different channels or different sources, right? So maybe you find out that Penelope's like to only listen to other moms, whereas Tina's always get information from chat groups and versus just listening face to face to other moms. And then maybe Catherine has tons of information sources and all that. So you try to build out that picture for each of the personas. And also the next step is really listing down what the key pain points are, right? So for Penelope, could be something like, can I afford something, a product or a service, without compromising quality? Because at the end of the day, it is my child that is potentially benefiting from this product or service, right? Or what it can offer. So how can I afford it without compromising quality? So if you can listen in, maybe that means, or that suggests to me that perhaps Penelope is a value consumer. If you look at the non-education space, we always define such consumers as value consumers. So then you drill down to the last section, which is, okay, so Penelope is a value consumer. So what? Can we do something about it? Is Penelope our customer? Right? So that's a question only you can answer for your organization. Maybe you figure out with your product team that, oh, hey, we do have a solution that matches the value proposition in terms of affordability and all that, that matches or fulfills the Penelope's pain points. So that you can come up with quote unquote a solution P for Penelope's, right? So you try to flesh that out for Tina and Catherine and however many other mom personas that you have. And you try to get the picture. Maybe I would suggest not more than 5 personas. I think in my past work, I have kept to maybe around 3 personas, and basically we started off with maybe 5 or 6, and then we whittled it down to 3, only because we feel that the other 2, it's quite unlikely we can address those needs, either from a price perspective or for a product feature perspective. So we zoom in on the 3 that we can actually take some action on and build this picture out. And yeah, basically this is quite an important tool in terms of understanding parents and how they think, and then tying that back to the business. The third tip I have is really expanding your research. So I think marketers are quite blessed now compared to maybe 10, 15 years ago. And Joe, you know this, you live in this world. Besides focus groups and surveys and things like that, you don't necessarily have to meet parents now anymore to kind of get a good guesstimate about how they behave and what they like and what they don't like, right? So because of the internet, because of social media, because everyone's plugged in now, everyone is on a mobile device. As a marketer, you have access to all the consumer insights on social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, as well as the traditional channels where you get information from maybe a parent magazine, right? They could have some insights over there. And other organizations, perhaps, I wouldn't call them competitors, but perhaps they offer similar goods or services that complement your product or service towards parents. Maybe it's also interesting to just check in with some of the social movements out there that parents pay a lot of attention to. Sorry. For example, a couple of years back, there was this new hashtag called Life Beyond Grades. I don't know how many of you have seen that or followed that, but that was this idea. I think this came up around the time of the primary six PSLE exam in Singapore. And really, it was trying to give parents some assurance that yes, the kids have to be prepared for the exam, but it's not the end of the world because there's so many stellar examples of kids that did well as adults, even though they did not score like the top of the class at PSLE. So it's this thing about life beyond grades, which I think at that moment in time, the timing fits because they were trying to talk about two things, right? Parents are anxious, so they are again tapping into that emotion, part that I was referring to earlier. So they're trying to allay the anxieties of the parents, which is great. And this is they're not trying to sell anything. So it's really trying to start a movement going. And really also to celebrate success in ways that are just other than academics. So it's really also trying to give parents perspective that yes, they're doing something very important to help their child succeed in the academic part, but there's actually a lot of things that kids need to be equipped with outside of academics in order to be a successful human being, right, or a successful functioning member of society. So that's kind of some of the things that I would probably look into in terms of expanding my research beyond the traditional channels. Um, yeah, and then I have this tip, which is access and timing. So I think as marketers, and I assume most of you work quite digitally already, it's a hit or miss, right? Sometimes with figuring out which are the peak timings to put your EDMs out, or post on Facebook, or do IG and things like that. So in my world, we actually do both online and offline engagements or marketing initiatives. And of course, EDMs are a part of it. Facebook posts are a part of it. Instagram is part of it as well. But we also have offline activation events. So these are events face to face where we get the parents to actually sign up for our product or service, right? So um, I would suggest for each of the personas that your business or your organization has decided to go ahead, to plan for, or to develop solutions for, make a map like that in terms of which are the campaigns that would go out and which timings you have set up for them, and then decide, just if you don't have a baseline idea, just go and test it out, right? Play with it, send out a couple of campaigns, and really, really analyze which are the campaigns with the same content that get a better pickup in a different part of the day or a different part of the week. So there's this, I think Sprout Social has this wonderful heat map. It's about consumer goods. It's not about education, but it really gives you a sense of how granular you can get in terms of figuring out when's the best time to. For this instance, it's Instagram, right? So when's the best time to post on Instagram, where you get the highest engagement. So the darker circles, the darker squares are actually where you see the highest engagement. So according to this, it says Wednesday 3 p.m. Very specific. It's the best time to post on Instagram, right? So and yeah, at the end of the day, I think you just need to realize that parents are on social media as consumers, but they are probably having to juggle a few different priorities in their schedule. So you will have those insights if you've done your parents' weekly schedule up before this, right? And so you can figure out which are the major chunks of their days. For example, the kids are off to school. So obviously, for those hours where the kids with the parents on their way to school, they're probably not on social media. Um, Unless you count a quick glance in the car, onto the phone as they're driving the kids. That's not very safe. But basically, you need to figure out what those chunks are, and then in between those chunks, that's where maybe parents have a little bit more time. I know from talking to parents, my sister as well, my friends, that after parents kind of drop off the kids, then they have this, especially moms, if they're not full-time moms, they have this chunk of time in the day, and that's when they will figure out, okay, so what I do to cook dinner and whatever. That's when they are in the mode of accepting information. So that could be an interesting timing to look at. For full-time moms, obviously they will be like full-time dads, so they will probably have a little bit more time on the commutes. Once they've dropped off the kids, they're at work. So maybe during work they have breaks. Then that's when they will be receptive to information. And then in the evening time, I would probably not suggest that or recommend that, because parents have this schedule that they will have to bring the kids home, somehow make dinner like a magician, or maybe bring dinner back home, and then make sure the kids get started on their homework, and then send them off to bed if the kids comply or oblige. And then after that, they might either have some time to themselves, to read or catch up on work or whatever. And then that's when maybe their mind is a little bit more quiet, and then that's when they might be more receptive to messages as well. So consider the access and timing. I would also recommend that we, as marketers, don't forget to check the personal data protection laws that apply, and rules for advertising to children if we are actually advertising directly towards children. So in both legal and scholastic, those are quite stringent rules that we adhere to. So this is something that you need to figure out with your legal department, or just go to the relevant authorities and figure out what those rules are, or the advertising association, things like that. Okay. Finally, once you've done all this work, I would probably reach the stage where I'm ready to kind of figure out what my brand's personality should be as I communicate towards the parents that I chose, right? So be it Catherine or be it Penelope, right? So there's a choice sometimes between a formal and casual tone of voice. So for the Tiger moms, for Tinas, maybe they are more amenable to formal or very practical kind of language. Whereas Catherine, maybe it's okay if you make it a little bit more casual. The sentences are full of abbreviations; those are fine. And maybe it's a little bit more fun, right? And I think the emotional part, don't be afraid to experiment with that as well. Once you figure out what are the emotional pain points, and during the analysis of the themes, as you do up the schedule for the week for each persona, then just think back to how you can write your marketing copy in a way that links up to that emotion that came up from your research, right? So don't be afraid to try that. But of course, in a tasteful manner, we are still managing, marketing to parents and kids. So you just need to be mindful about that. The other 2 points that I've asterisked here are really just marketing 101, right? So I think all of us know that when we have a certain value proposition that we're trying to communicate to a teenager, then we have to make sure along the customer journey, through the various touch points, through the various channels, be it social media, print media, or during uh, an offline, sorry, a physical event, activation event, there should be consistency, or Tina should perceive of your brand persona or personality consistently, right? And I think you should also consider the nature of the channel. I think these are probably, I would assume most of you know what I'm talking about in terms of videos are obviously a much better, a more engaging channel compared to text. And also the length of the videos, we talk about 30 seconds, maybe even less, trying to get your message across. Is that even possible with the product or solution that my organization has? I think a lot of the parent facing videos that I've seen either on Instagram as an advertisement or on YouTube tend to focus, jump straight into what are the impact on the children, and basically in a very short elevator pitch, you just figure out, trying to get across the points of what your product or service can do in a way that addresses the pain points of the personas that you have highlighted earlier. So that's kind of my last slide. So I know that some of you have indicated you would like to do a one-to-one follow-up after this. I'm more than happy to take that on. So please feel free to contact me and reach out if you need to do that. So I think Joe, if I'm not wrong, now we can open up for questions, right?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, James. Really, really appreciate you sharing your insights. And like I said, we want to keep this as conversational as possible. So if anyone has any questions, now is the time. Either let us know in the chat or just turn on your mic, and happy to answer any of them right now. If not, I'll go up. Yes, Jamie, what is your question for James? Awesome. We have a couple people in the chat.
Okay, let me just stop this sharing so we can, yep.
All right.
Go to the chat group.
So I think while they're asking their questions, one of them which I had was, you talked about the multiple personas and the multiple tones. From a brand perspective, do you think it makes sense to have multiple tones coming from the same brand? Or are you saying that you pick it based on which one is going to be the largest target audience? So are they tiger moms? Or are they kind of more kind of casual moms? And then picking it based on that and then sticking with the tone for that specific audience.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I don't think there's a right answer to this. So you have to figure out for your own respective organizations. How I would probably try to do it is because I was in organizations where the brand was quite important. And the brand was governed by brand guidelines that are global. So in many cases, I have very little wiggle room to kind of change that to something completely different. So I would say how I can message it to the let's say the 3 different personas is I would look at the global brand guidelines, the brand messaging, brand positioning, and then add a couple of elements that we think would resonate to each of the 3 moms. But really how they should feel it more is with the customized product or solution offers that the organization is coming up with. So you want to call it segmentation, that's fine. But really, be it Tina, Catherine, or Penelope, they should see, for example, Scholastic as, oh, the children's publisher. They love reading, and it's about reading, it's about love of reading and joy of reading and that kind of thing. And then when you go down to Penelope's solution, maybe the product page that Penelope sees or the ads that we push out to her for her to see is going to message differently. Maybe it's about offers, maybe it's about book bundles. And then when it comes to Catherine, it's about the fun part, or maybe there's an author's visit that it's upcoming, and get her involved and get her kid involved, that kind of thing. So that's, I think the three personas should be able to perceive a difference at the product or solution level. I think that's probably more practical and more relevant for the business than trying to crack your brain to figure out how can one brand turn out to be three personalities, right? So that's a bit more challenging. Yeah.
Got it. I think it makes perfect sense. We have a quick question from Nick. Nick says, "Hey James, can I check with you when you mentioned earlier regarding the understanding of the week of the parent? Do you go through the three personas that you highlight? What types of questions is important to capture the emotions?"
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Nick, for the question. I think you have two questions, right? So the first question is when we map out the week of the parent, yes, I would actually map out the week by interviewing as many parents as I can. So if you have limited time and resources, then obviously you just make do with what you have. But you do that before you figure out, not necessarily with the mind that, okay, today I am meeting potentially a Penelope, and this parent I've never met before. So therefore, there is a so-called Penelope weekly schedule. I think you start off with a clean slate first, and then you do the weekly mapping. And then as you figure out, as you jot the notes down, and then you take it back to the team, you do a brainstorming, and then you can figure out, okay, so let's say we have 15 interviews done, 15 schedules that we come up with. And then you can say, oh, actually these three are kind of similar. They're saying the same thing, they have the same schedule. And in terms of the kind of pain points that they were emotional about, it was quite similar, right? And then maybe another 5 were quite similar to each other. So that's when you can kind of filter down and then create your personas based on that. In terms of saying, of course, it's not it's a general rule. You have to, kind of be flexible about it. But once you figure that out, the 3 baskets of schedules, then you can say, okay, so maybe we think that Penelope's have this kind of schedule, and therefore their pain points are such and such. And then maybe for Catherine's, it's going to look like this. And then for Tina's, it's going to look like this. And these are their typical pain points. And I don't discount that, it's quite possible especially if you have a small batch of data to work from, that you might end up with a whole spectrum of different needs and themes, and you don't know what to do about them, right? So it's like you get 15 interviews, 15 schedules, and they all look different from each other. So what do I do, right? So I think you need to just look deeper into it, and if you feel that you need to go back and ask the parents the questions again, deeper questions, trying to capture the next level question of, okay, so why did Tina say that? Is it because she shares this a theme or pain point with Catherine or with other Tinas? Or maybe she's not a Tina. She said this, but actually she meant something else. This was more important to her. So I think don't be afraid to also go out and revisit those key pain points. You shouldn't, of course, ask everyone to redo their schedules and redo the interviews. That would be quite tedious. The second question you have is, what types of questions that's important to you to capture the emotion? I think there's no right way of doing this. I think when I look back at how I try and get some insights from, let's say, using my sister or my friends as guinea pigs, right? So I would typically let them talk, and then I would typically ask them, really just listen to them and focus on which are the topics that they really spend a lot of time explaining. Maybe a part of their day went horribly, horribly wrong. And then that's when by just listening to them, you can just ask them what happened. Tell me about what happened. How did you feel? You know, how do you wish things were different? You know, and then they could tell you. So I felt frustrated. I felt that the rest of my day schedule was totally gone off. And I felt that I couldn't be there to pick up my kid because this other thing broke down or whatever it is. So I think that's kind of the couple of questions that will generate a lot of insights from the parents already. And then I think the question, the challenge I have in the past is usually not that I don't have questions to ask the parents. It's usually how to whittle it down in a usable form for the marketing team or the product team, right? So yeah, that's kind of it actually. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yes. So one question from Mavis says, do you think focus groups to invite parents help better understand how to engage them?
Do I think what
Focus,
focus groups?
inviting focus helps
Yeah.
better understand, engage them.
Um, in my experience, I would say focus group work better for educators, teachers. For parents, I have found that parents as consumers um, are less used to that form of questioning. So I think when you say focus group, I hope you and I mean the same thing. So it's about this concept where we invite people to come to a special room and there's a mirror. A one-way mirror, right? And then basically you are observing, taking notes, and then there's a professional facilitator asking the questions that your team wants to ask, right? And then you take down the notes and you say, oh, the parent did this and did that. So in a consumer world, I find that, especially for education, I find that in the presence of other parents, there are some of the deeper questions that parents are less likely to want to share openly. So which is why I found that if I wanted to get really to the heart of the pain points, a one-to-one is obviously takes more time, but is so much richer in terms of the data the insights that I get versus a focus group. If you're talking about a very, very so-called experienced kind of parent group, right? And then they've done so many focus groups and all that. So I think then that's a different story. Probably you can get to those insights that you otherwise have to do via one-to-one interviews. But yeah, I think you can go and try, but yeah, but in my experience, at least, focus groups have been less helpful for the parent side of things. I think because when I was in education, we actually did do focus groups for teachers as well, and those were very, very insightful. Because I think teachers, when they talk about the students, it's not their own child, so it's a little bit easier to talk about, what's bothering them in terms of their teaching in the class. Yeah.
Awesome. Probably have time for one more question, then we'll wrap it up. It says, do you guys have mom groups or chat forums in Singapore that aid in marketing for online cafes, or you think of Instagram or Facebook, I guess, groups for parents?
Yes, so I'm not part of any of these groups, and obviously I've heard of so many of them from my friends as well as my sister. So apparently there's a PSLE moms group or PSLE parents group, I think, on Facebook. Obviously I wouldn't qualify to join that group, but if you have friends who do qualify, you can always get them to invite you, or you can go in yourself and then have a look at what goes on over there. I think a lot of the parent chat groups there are more about practical information and really support groups in terms of, okay, so this is what's happening with admissions exercise. This is what MOE is saying, So it's really about fulfilling a need for information and a need to not feel alone as in this case, a PSLE mom, right? So you want to not feel helpless, and you go to such groups to number one, know that you are not alone, and number two, know that there's tons of people out there that have gone to the other side already successfully, and these are their advice. So I would say yes, there's tons of groups like that, but they tend to mostly be private. So if you find a public one that you can just add yourself in, that would be fantastic. I think just to be mindful that a lot of these groups, especially the private ones, have rules against advertising. So if you want to post something, you have to work with one of the parents inside there to kind of craft a message that subtly introduces your product or service. So it's not a channel for you to do in your face type of marketing.
Yeah.
I think it's a good
Awesome.
channel to listen to the conversations. Yeah, I think.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much, James. Really, really appreciate it. And thank you so much for everyone who's joined today's session. If you want to get in touch with James, connect with him on LinkedIn, and we'll be sharing his email address post this. But thank you so much again. Look forward to seeing you guys next time. Until then, take care, and we'll see you soon.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. Thanks,
Bye,
everyone.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.